Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, quick match gameplay. This time around we are on the map Sulphur River, playing as the Vampire Counts against the High Elves. And so, obviously with the High Elves, there's quite a bit of nastiness the High Elves can throw at you, most notably dragons, and it's going to be pretty difficult to wrest the skies from them, so I decided to go with an all-foot Slogger army and try to make that work. For my lord here, I decided to bring the old classic, Vladdy Daddy. So I think Vlad von Karstein is actually a pretty good lord against the Vampire Counts, because Manfred's a little more susceptible to gooning. Manfred's not exactly optimized for slogging it out in the pits on foot, whereas Vlad is, and Vlad of course does have quite a few supportive debuffs. He's got the Aura of Dark Grandeur for -4 leadership. He also does have the Master of Beguilement, which is -4 melee attack, which -44 melee attack, which on 44-second duration, that can basically shut down, say, a unit of Swordmasters and make them much less effective. Of course, I did bring Raised Dead here, as well as Blood Drinker and the Invocation of Nehek. No Karstein Ring, because I figured it wasn't really necessary. Usually people don't focus on killing Vlad, because he's a rather hard lord to kill. And instead, they'll try to, they'll just leave him for last, at which point the ring is fairly useless. Now for the rest of my army here, the front line is pretty cheap. 2 Graveguard with great weapons and 2 vanilla Graveguard. A few extra chevrons thrown into them. The Graveguard is basically, I assume my opponent's strongest forces would be in the center, where my Graveguard with great weapons can come into play. And then all the lighter armored stuff like spears would probably be on the flanks, and the Graveguard will absolutely thrash the High Elf spears. Granted, it'll be a little grindy because they don't have the greatest melee offensive stats, but they do have 90 armor, silver shields, and they're just a pretty solid unit overall. Graveguard are definitely, in my opinion, one of the best infantry in the game for cost. Behind them, I do have a single Necromancer mounted on a horse, coming in with, once again, Invocation of Nehek and Raised Dead, Forbidden Rod for extra power reserves, and then the Curse of course, Curse of Undeath is built in, and Master of the Dead to replenish hit points. So it definitely gives a nice little healing aura, and I do like the doubled up Invocations of Nehek and Raised Dead, because sometimes you need to cast it in multiple spots at once. Then really the supporting tools are kind of the most important part here. On the flank, Vampire of Shadows with Enfeebling Foe, as well as Melkot's Mystifying Miasma for the slow. She's a passable melee combatant herself and does provide a bonus to leadership, so definitely not a pushover. And once again, going for that wombo combo with the Chillgheists, I did bring Smoke and Mirrors. So if you hit, say, if your opponent brings, say, a bunch of Lyrian Reaver archers, you can hit them with Melkot's Mystifying Miasma. That'll bump your Chillgheist up to about 105-ish speed, and these guys will then, of course, get into range, get their chilling aura going, and then they will be able to absolutely shred those units in melee. They are backed by the Dire Pack here to deal more damage to large targets. Dire Pack's actually, I think, a very good choice against the High Elves. High Elves have a lot of fairly squishy units that do count as large. Obviously not great against cavalry, but against dragons especially and phoenixes, they'll do rather well with their 14 bonus for large. Finally in the back, the Feasters in the Dusk, of course, sneaking up, going for a kind of commando raid against any backline archers or bolt throwers my opponent might bring. And on the other flank, some Blood Knights, so bring that crushing power against large. I do think Blood Knights are an okay choice as well. They can trade pretty well with Dragon Princes, and they'll run down dragons and those annoying large units pretty well as well, especially with backing from, say, a caster. For my opponent, definitely an interesting build. Not a bad one by any means, but a very infantry heavy. You can see for his lord, he did decide to bring a Mage of High Magic, who did bring a Starwood Staff, as well as the Book of Hoeth, which will give her ludicrous amounts of Winds of Magic. She does have the Shield of Sapphire, of course, because it's high magic. Apotheosis for those heals. Hand of Glory, which is a bit of an interesting pick, but it is a cheap buff that procs Shield of Sapphire. Plus 26 melee attack will allow basically any of these elite core units here to crush my Graveguard pretty quickly, and can counteract Master of Beguilement. Fiery Convocation to crush cheap chaff units. I don't think it's particularly useful against my heavily armored troops, but obviously against skeletons it can be decent. And Tempest, which I think is also a very good choice against, in case your opponent decides to bring air spam. For his backline, my opponent does have 2 units, or actually 3 units of archers. Obviously the unarmored variant. These guys will shred through cheap units. They can apply some backline pressure. If I brought, say, basically they're just a good shooting unit. They can apply pressure to anything, and even Graveguard will eventually melt to their Withering Fire. 2 units of spears are covering the back, 3 units of spear anchoring the flanks, 2 Swordmasters of Hoeth, and a Phoenix Guard anchoring the center, and these guys of course will be able to hold, and just these 3 core units here in the middle would probably outtrade the 2 Graveguard and Vlad on their own. Actually all the Graveguard probably and Vlad on their own, without support. Finally, of course, the Prince up in the air on the Star Dragon, so definitely some nastiness here. He does have the Blade of Belkar Hadris, Stand Your Ground, Foe Seeker, Deadly Onslaught, and of course that Breath attack. And I was really worried here a little bit that my opponent would go in with a Breath, hit my Graveguard with great weapons, and make himself a bit more of a nuisance. Or you can see my Necromancer pushed a little too far forward, my opponent does decide to dive in with the dragon. And of course, the dragon with its monstrous mass is just going to plow straight through, going after my necromancer. Lands a meaty hit. The necromancer is actually he's not susceptible to fire. I always think that because they have that built-in regen or that heal, they're susceptible to fire, but they're not because it's not actually regeneration. It's got a different name. It's like Master of Undeath. Regardless, he does dive in after the Necromancer, who's very squishy, but I do manage to kind of bog him down with Graveguard and get a charge from the Blood Knights in. And you can see the Blood Knights immediately dropping the dragon by a good chunk of HP. The dragon only has 80 armor, which is decent, but it's nothing too spectacular, and it does lose about 600, 700 HP on a less than ideal charge there. Front lines in the meantime do meet, and this is a big mistake for my opponent. He's got two of his elite units clumped up on a single unit of Graveguard here, as well as these spears. So this is definitely a bit of a disproportionate commitment. I do start pulling my Blood Knights away, figuring, you know what, I don't want anything to do with this. But my opponent popped all of his buffs and decides to stay in the fray. And this is definitely a little bit of a greedy play here because of this whole mob of anti-large is coming in. You can see that the dragon dives in a little forward, Dire Pack is on top of him, Blood Knights turn around, and then the Chillgheist are in. And now the Dragon Prince, unless he pulls through his front line, he will not be able to escape. And he's just getting, obviously my opponent's trying to provide support with his archers, but I do hit him with an enfeebling foe, and you can see the damage is immediately stacking up. Of course, the dragon doesn't do magical damage, it just does fire, so it can't really harm the Chillgheist very much. Chillgheist doing great AP damage. The Dire Pack in there doing solid anti-large. The Blood Knights also have a very good anti-large bonus. I do believe it's 22. So they're absolutely shredding the Prince with incredible speed. And despite all these buffs going down, he's also been hit by enfeebling foe. So he's really not in a good spot right now. And it's interesting enough, it's not showing the effects for enfeebling foe, but his melee attack and melee defense was actually much lower in this situation. In the meantime, I did summon some skeletons in the backline who, while being bogged down by spears a little bit, are tying in these archers, preventing them from firing constantly. And these criticals are finally breaking cover and going in for the archers in the back. Over here, my opponent does try to free up his prince with a fiery convocation, but I counteract with an overcast invocation of Nehek, and I'm just pounding this prince down. You can see he's losing his leadership incredibly quickly, trying to pull away, trying to get back through his troops, back through his line, but it's really not not going to happen. Despite Apotheosis going down, he's actually going to rout here. His morale breaks, and that is really a problem for my opponent because the prince starts routing the wrong way. Instead of going back through his troops, he's going off to the flank, and my opponent doesn't have any other fast troops to support him. In the backline, the Feasters in Dusk have broken cover. They are on top of the archers now, and they will slaughter them mercilessly. You can see already these guys are dropping models like flies. These guys are up to 17 kills already. The Feasters in the Dusk, definitely, I don't know about a hidden gem, definitely a gem with stock, but they are going to shred through these archers incredibly quickly. You can see they're getting dropped really, really pretty quick. I absolutely love this unit. Very powerful against these sort of squishy infantry. I do almost get intercepted here. My Necromancer almost gets beaten down, so I pull away. I don't really want to lose my Necromancer just for those ones of magic. Over here, I'm making sure to kill the Prince off. I don't want him coming back, especially as he's not shattered yet, and he doesn't actually shatter before he dies, so definitely some brutal stuff there. I do get a rear charge here on the Spearman. You can see in this trade, prior to this charge from the Hex Race coming in, these guys were already beaten down to pulp, and the Graveguard have basically not taken a scratch. They lost less than 1,000 HP, and they basically crushed the Spearmen. So definitely that shows how powerful the Graveguard can be against these cheap chaff troops. The Chillgheist do dive in. Obviously these guys have anti-large, and the lack of armor piercing doesn't matter, but they're immediately going to tear out. And in the meantime, the Blood Knights do dive in against the archers here. And I'm not entirely sure why the mass of the charge failed. One of the interesting things to note, and this was something that was brought to my attention on the forums actually, is that Blood Knights have terrible mass. They've only got, their mass is actually less than Black Knights with lances and barding, and I do believe even the vanilla Black Knights. And I think they might even have less mass than Chillgheists. So they really don't have the power against the stationary, densely packed troop of archers to push them back. And that's, first of all, kind of ridiculous, but that's actually why these guys weren't sent flying, and it's why I couldn't plow the Blood Knights through the second line of archers. It's definitely some unfortunate stuff, but I do just pull the Blood Knights back. Over here, launching some more terror-causing charges against the Spearmen between the Dire Pack and the Chillgheist. Get another heal. You can see, despite everything, I did hit these guys with a Master Beguilement earlier. The Graveguard have held okay. They're up to 46 kills, probably most of those against the Spearmen, but some against the Swordmasters as well. And they're slowly chipping these guys down, bringing their HP pools down, and slowly but surely getting rid of them. These Graveguard have held for a surprisingly long amount of time. Only 13 kills, but they've tied down a unit of Swordmasters until now, and these spears. And I do now get the Feasters in the Dusk, who basically finished off the archers to get on top of the Spearmen over here. And the Feasters will make quick work of these elven sort of lightly armored troops. In the meantime, my Necromancer is trying to harass. You can see I do start pulling my cav, kind of trying to pressure out these Spearmen, trying to shatter them. These Spearmen over here buckling. These Spearmen have shattered for good. You can see the Blood Knights coming in for another go. I have used the Dire Pack to tie down the spears. Definitely you want to use your sort of light, fast troops to tie down anti-large infantry if you can, because they don't tend to have very good melee stats. And over here you can see another some of zombies going down. Blood Knights about to pile into these archers, and that time they were sent flying a little more. Still not quite as impactful as, say, a charge from regular Black Knights with Lance and Barding or Reichsguard or something like that. But it does break the archers. Zombie summon in there is obviously hurting morale a whole bunch. A vampire is coming in. Over here you can see the Necromancer running for dear life with the Forbidden Rod procced. He can't stand up to Mage of High Magic at all, especially not with martial prowess. But you can see the front line is finally buckling. My opponent's spearmen are just falling apart. The Chillgheist are still very healthy. They're on 74 kills, and they've been slaughtering the Swordmasters in here, and the Phoenix Guard have been hit by Master Beguilement, so they're really not able to deal with the Chillgheists. And that really only leaves these Swordmasters, who are, of course, susceptible to Fear and Terror, and they'll most likely rout fairly shortly. And you can see my opponent's army at this point is just going to fall apart. You can see my Necromancer there running for dear life, but that is going to be game, as the forces of the Undead do take the win. So definitely a little bit of a freeze up here at the end. I'm not entirely sure why, but definitely some good stuff, I think, for the Vampire Counts. In this sort of matchup, I found the Feasters and the Dusk are an absolutely amazing unit. I hesitate to call them a hidden gem, but they're one of those units you don't see very often in a quick match. But despite that, I think they're actually one of the better units on the roster for the Vampire Counts, because they give you a better version of Crypt Ghouls that negates the Crypt Ghouls' one weakness, and that's really susceptibility to shooting. The problem with Crypt Ghouls is that against most of the factions they'd be good against, they get shredded by shooting, so you're better off bringing the Slaughter Graveguard. But in this situation, you can make use of their mobility to get around flanks, to apply that flank pressure without getting spotted and without getting sniped to death by archers. And in this match, you definitely saw it. They raked in 84 kills, most of those against spears and archers, and so definitely doing their job, easily paying for themselves. The Graveguard, of course, did a great job. Obviously, these guys, nothing fancy. 17 kills, most of those probably against spearmen, but they held their ground and they were a nuisance. This other unit of Graveguard absolutely trashed those spearmen, you can see, with basically no casualties. And two Graveguard with great weapons held the center. These guys even gained a chevron, just holding their ground, slugging out with those elite elven troops. And of course, the benefit of being unbreakable there is definitely showing. With the backing of Vlad and his Master Beguilement and the occasional Invocation of the Heck, they were really able to hold their ground. Obviously, they wouldn't have won against the Swordmasters, but they were able to draw things out while the cavalry won the day. Vampire Shadows providing an enfeebling foe to make life easier for the Chillgheist and Blood Knights, and of course the Dire Pack and the two cavalry units here were absolutely brutal. Chillgheist are definitely one of those, and I think Hex Wraiths are not quite as good as Chillgheist to bring, just because they don't have that AoE debuff. But Chillgheist are, I think, a very, very brutal unit to bring. They cause Fear and Terror, and most high elf units are susceptible to that except they're monsters. They're incredibly fast. They can prevent skirmish units. They're your best counter to skirmish units. If your opponent brings a bunch of Illyrian Reavers, let's say 2 or 3 units of them, even if you bring Dire Pack, your opponent can just pile into you with the Illyrian Reavers and they'll beat you down. Whereas the Chillgheist will outtrade Illyrian Reavers. If you can hit them with a Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma, you prevent them from escaping, and then the Chillgheist are on you and you're done. Blood Knights, I think, provide a little bit of a harder counter to large targets like dragons and dragon princes, though obviously Chillgheist can still do okay. For my opponent's build, I don't think this is a bad build at all. I think a little bit of overcommitment here into spearmen. You really don't necessarily need this many spearmen. Spearmen aren't great at cleaning up chaff like skeletons or zombies anyway. I think you'd be better off just having a little bit of a lighter back line. Try to use this. You could have gotten a unit of dragon princes safe with these spearmen, which I think would have been a little more helpful. Otherwise, Illyrian Reaver archers are a decent choice against the forces of the undead. That's definitely one of those units I think can be a pretty big game changer. The Frostheart Phoenix also decent, but other than that, I do think this was a pretty solid build. I just think there's basically these 3 spearmen, or 3 units of spearmen, that could have been better invested into a single elite unit to really kind of carry the day. But otherwise, yeah, good build. Good game to Nostradamus here. Definitely some rough stuff for his prince, but the elites held much better. So, good game. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions, anything like that, be sure to share them and I'll respond as soon as I can. And as usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.